So for this month's art technique of the month, we are going to work with subtractive drawing. So when we talked about the Paleolithic era and we were talking about how they would blow pigments over hands, do you remember that? So you'd put your hand up on the wall and then you could blow a pigment around it and you would see the outline of the hand where the pigment was not, right? So we can do some experimentations with, blowing pigment, but that can get kind of messy. Of course, you can play with that. Let me know how that goes. But another way that we can play with creating a negative outline, which basically means like the material is in the places where the object is not. A way that we can do that is through subtractive drawing. So the way that we can do that is we would then cover a piece of paper with like charcoal. So you rub a bunch of charcoal on there and then you use an eraser to lift the charcoal up to create your drawings. So you can create some really cool effects by doing this subtractive drawing technique. So I'm going to show you a little bit of what I like to do when I'm working on subtractive drawings. And I'll also drop a link here that describes some other ways that you can use subtractive drawing. So let's get started. All right, so we'll get started with this charcoal pencil, or this compressed charcoal here. And then I've got my paper here. So I'm using a brown paper. You can use a white paper and the effect will be much more, there'll be a much bigger contrast between the charcoal and the paper itself. I'm gonna go a little more muted. So I'm gonna use the charcoal and the brown paper. And then you're gonna pick out some different erasers. So I have a couple of different shapes of erasers. You can also use like cotton swabs to lift up the charcoal. I have this fun eraser shape that my son got in like a pencil sharpener, but it can create some really interesting effects here. You can see there's like these ridges that are fun to experiment with. And then I've got just more of a traditional one down here. That's probably the end I'll use, and I can create a nice sharp line, right? And then you have this wider edge, which you can use to like create these big swaths of pulling up a little bit of the charcoal at a time. And then you've got just like a more traditional pencil eraser. This is like a colored pencil. So we'll see how this works. I may or may not use this very much, but we'll see how it goes, since I have some really cool lines and shapes that I can create with these over here. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cover the whole piece of paper with this charcoal. All right, so depending on the type of charcoal you use, this could take a while. That definitely made my arm a little bit tired using the compressed charcoal sticks. If you use like the willow charcoal or the vine charcoal, it'll go on a lot smoother, but it can get super duper messy when you're working that material. The compressed charcoal, you can see, is like my hands are a little bit messy, not too bad. Let me see, not too bad, right? But the perk of working with this is I keep this in the house because my son is 4, and if I keep vine charcoal in the house, it's going to end up everywhere. So this is at least a little less of a potential hazard in my home. So if you're using the compressed charcoal, just be prepared to have a bit of a sore arm. Otherwise, grab yourself some vine charcoal and have at it. Another point if you're working with kiddos is you may want to do this before you start their activity with them, so you can go ahead and cover the paper and charcoal for them first and then hand it over to them with some erasers and see what they come up with. So I'm going to play a little bit. I'll show you what I come up with, and then I'll show you what Bjorn does as well. Okay, so you can see my eraser shavings everywhere. So what I did is I experimented with doing like a Bob Ross-esque landscape where I have some mountains happening in the background, and then I pulled away some more and created some of these little pine trees in the front. I used this edge here to create like a little light hatching in the background. Let's see if I can get that. You can barely see it because it's already had a lot of hatching in the way that I did the charcoal, but this is a fun way, like you pull up more to get a lighter show of the paper, you pull up a little less. Back here you can see I use this pencil eraser to create these like really harsh edges back here. But it's fun. You can create a lot of different types of shapes, and the way that you did your charcoal is still gonna show through. You'll see it down here. You still see the shapes of the charcoal lines that I was creating. So you get a lot of texture when you work this way. It's a fun experiment. I'll also show you what my son did. So this is what Bjorn did. Let me move my piece out of the way so it's easier to see. So what he did is he used some other colors to create a roller coaster. So this is a very extensive roller coaster system, but he used the different colors here to do the roller coaster, and then we used the eraser to pull up some of these edges, some of these spots in the middle to give it more depth. So that's a fun way to experiment as well with subtractive drawing, is that you can of course do other materials on top of the charcoal and then lift up spaces to create an interesting pattern. So I hope you'll experiment with this. Let me know what you think about subtractive drawing, and again, I have the link in this description to give you some more information, and thank you so much for being here.